Good night, everybody. Good night, everybody, and welcome. Can you listen to me? All right, now, second question. Can you see the presentation? All right, as I told you earlier, all of our sessions will be recorded. So if you cannot be online on time, don't worry. You can watch it later. All the sessions will be recorded, and you can access them anywhere, anytime. So please do not worry. All right. First things first, let's talk about your assignments, guys. Okay, assignment number 1 is a brief resume on the 23rd chapter of the book that I uploaded. Now, on the subject number 2, that's for next week assignment. There's another brief resume on the book that I uploaded. Also, you have a second assignment on the second week that it is a clinical cases, acid-base disorders, clinical cases. All of these 3 assignments will be due to Sunday 27th. That's from this Sunday until the next one. Any questions? Your microphones are allowed, so if anybody have a question, either raise your hand or you can speak freely through the microphone. Well, thanks for joining me, and let's begin. So the first session, it is intravenous solutions or intravenous fluids. You have to know, therefore, some previous things about the spaces that you already know: extracellular space, which is the intravascular space, and the intracellular space. So, on surgery, it is very important for you to manage these kind of solutions, and what kind of solutions are available for you to use and their main indications. So as you can recall, the goal of these classes is to achieve and maintain a normal volume and to keep the balance of your patient. So you have to know which solution would be best suited for each patient according to the hydration state, to the hemodynamic status, and also to the electrolyte values of your patient. As you can recall, about 60% of our body is contained in water. This is then divided in extracellular space and intracellular space. Now, the extracellular space contains the plasma, which is the intravascular space, and the interstitial space. When we infused solutions, we are controlling mostly the intravascular space. So if we can keep up with the intravascular space, we are therefore improving the hydrostatic pressure, as you can recall in your physiology lessons. Therefore, we can contribute to improve the hemodynamic state of a patient. So the general recommendations is that we have to advise the volume losses that the patient had. Example, we can divide them into external losses or renal losses. External losses, you may be familiar with them, such as in the gastrointestinal tract, such as vomiting, diarrhea. These are the most common. Other kind of GI losses are the fistulas, which they're not very common, but from time on occasions, you may see them on the surgery board. Ostomies, do you all know what ostomies is? It is the communication of a hollow viscous organ, such as the intestines or the colon, onto the outside. Now, also as external losses, we have those conditions or those pathologies that can cause a leakage from the intravascular space to the interstitial space. One that is very important for you to recall is the pancreatitis, because pancreatitis can cause a great deal of volume loss between 4 or 5 liters. So a patient with pancreatitis, the cornerstone of its treatment would be to keep him hydrated. Another condition such as small bowel obstructions or burns, they can lose a tremendous amount of volume causing externally. Now the renal losses, these are exclusively talking about the kidney disease or the using of diuretics. We can have a variety of conditions. As you can recall, we are not just have water by itself. It is with sodium, chloride, calcium, magnesium, phosphates, and so on. So you can have low volume with a great amount of sodium, and in these patients you have to be careful that you infuse water that do not contain a lot of sodium chloride. We'll get that eventually. So here is because you lose only volume, not as much as solutes such as sodium chloride. A great example of this is vomiting, diarrhea, or renal losses due to diuretics. You can have normal volume but have concentrated sodium, and this is the inability to access free water, such as patients that you have on enteral tube feeding, that they're not allowed to eat nothing but mouth. This is a NPO. It is the Latin term of neo per os, which neo per os, that means nothing by mouth. You will be encountering this term in your English article, so you may take a note of this. NPO meaning neo per os in Latin, which means nothing by mouth, and in these patients you might have a little bit of normal volume, but the sodium concentrated. And you can have both. You can have a lot of sodium and therefore a lot of volume accumulated. And this is most common causes on TPN, total parenteral nutrition, which is a wrong volume added of free water. But after seeing all this, you will find a great deal of different solutions. Luckily for you, we're going to use only one, and we'll address that shortly. So we have a classification of IV solutions, and they are classified according to the amount of solutes that they contain. We have the isotonic solutions, the hypotonic solutions, and the hypertonic solutions. The isotonic solutions, they are measured according to the human being osmolarity. Can anybody recall which is the normal range of normal osmolarity? Anybody? Don't fall asleep on me. 280, Cynthia, that's correct. between 280 and 280 to 90 or 280 and 300. Well, these solutions that fall into this range of osmolarity, we're going to call them isotonic. Now, those below the normal osmolarity range are going to be called hypotonic, and those above the normal osmolarity range are going to be hypertonic. Is this clear? All right, let's move on. So, an example of an isotonic solution is the famous normal saline solution. Okay, take a note of this. Normal saline solution that contains only sodium and chloride. Now, how much does it contain? It contains exactly 154 milliequivalents of sodium plus another 154 milliequivalents of chloride, which means if you do the math, we're saying it is 308 in milliosmoles, right? So you can say, all right, how can you call this an isotonic solution if the normal range of osmolarity it is between 280 and 300? Strictly speaking, 308 goes beyond 300, right? So in the most strict way of putting this, you can consider this normal saline solution as an hypertonic solution. Is this correct? But for practical uses, we consider this solution as an isotonic solution because it goes beyond just a little bit the maximum osmolarity. All right? So this solution is normal saline solution is considered as an isotonic solution, and it is called the famous crystalloid solutions. All right? They're called the crystalloid. All right? Crystalloids. So we have these. We have Ringer lactate, which is also Hartmann. I'm going to make a difference between here. Ringer lactate and Hartmann have a slight bit difference. Ringer lactate has, as its name states, it has lactate in a solution. And Hartmann solution does not have lactate. What do they have? They have sodium, they have chloride, they have magnesium, and they have bicarbonate. But the difference between these two is Ringer lactate, which has lactate, and Hartmann solution that does not have lactate. These are the other solutions that we're going to call crystalloids. And we have that mixed solutions. When you see this in English especially, that means dextrose, D for dextrose 5, water. That means water with dextrose at 5%. We're going to see percentages further ahead. But we call these in Mexico as a mixed solution. Why mixed? Because it has normal saline solution plus glucose solutions. Glucose at 5%, 10%, or 50%. Now you're going to find also hypotonic solutions. That means they have a lower osmolarity than the normal range. That means below 280. And these are special preparations with sodium and chloride at a lower percentage. You're not going to use this, but they were formerly used in severe head trauma. Neurologists used to, more accurately, neurosurgeons used to handle these kind of infusions, so the patient would stop the brain swallow or to avoid the swelling of the brain, and they used to perform this. What would be an adverse reaction if you put a solution that has low osmolarity into the intravascular space? Anybody? What would you expect your patient to have if you infuse him with a solution that has low solutes? I'll give you a hint. You have to recall this in terms of osmosis. When you infuse a solution, that's right, Sarah, that's right, congratulations, edema will ensure. Why? Because it will pull out the volume from the intravascular space into the interstitial space. It will pull it out. Therefore, edema will resolve. But you're not going to use this. This is just for class purposes only. And then we have the hypertonic solutions, which are solutions that are in a high value of solutes, such as the mixed solutions. That means dextrose at 10%. Now, when we say percentages in a mixed solutions, we have to infer this. If we are talking about a solution that has 5% of glucose, we're saying that it has 5 grams of glucose every 100 milliliters. That means if you have a 500 milliliters mixed solution at 5%, how many grams of glucose does it have? That's right, that's right. It has 25 grams of glucose, the entire solution. All right? So careful, if you infuse this, let's say you infuse a mixed solution of 1,000 milliliters at 5%. Now, in the total amount, how many grams of glucose will you be infusing your patient? 50 grams of glucose. Now, question, would it be appropriate to infuse this kind of solution on an uncontrolled diabetic patient? All right, there you go, you're getting the idea. Now, the same thing goes for a mixed solution that is at 10%. That means we have 10 grams of glucose per 100 milliliters of solution. That means if you infuse a patient with 1,000 milliliters of solution, how many grams of glucose total will you infuse in them? 100 grams. Are we okay with this? We're gonna see some indications about this later on. Let's keep going. So, what kind of solutions do you have? You have nutrient solutions. We're going to address that into on the subject number 7, which is parenteral nutrition. You have your electrolyte solutions, which are the crystalloid solutions that we've already seen, such as normal saline, Hartmann solution, or mixed solution. And you're going to hear something about volume expanders. Careful, careful. Volume expanders are prohibited in acute resuscitation. All right? They are prohibited in an acute resuscitation. Why? Because they see that the volume expanders, they cause acute kidney failure. So it is a very bad outcome for a patient that you are resuscitating after being traumatized. We're going to see further that ahead. So nutrient solutions, we may consider, for instance, a mixed solution that has normal saline plus glucose, some form of nutrient solution, because you're providing a big amount of carbohydrate in the form of glucose, all right? But you cannot use this as an entirely form of nutrition, all right? When do you use a mixed solution? I'll give you an example. A patient has been operated from an inguinal hernia, and he hasn't eaten for 2 days in a row. Now, can you imagine yourselves not eating 2 days in a row? How would you feel? You start with headache, you feel a bit nauseous, you feel dizziness, and you feel weak. Now, in order, let's say that this patient is not allowed to have nothing by mouth or meal per os. In an attempt to provide him with a bit of nutrients, especially carbohydrates, we infuse this patient a mixed solution. Therefore, we are hydrating him because of the saline solution, and also we are providing some grams of glucose. Therefore, the patient has carbohydrate to keep that energy and stop feeling bad from the starvation. Is this clear? All right. So we say this, we've seen this, the crystalloid solutions is a normal saline, Ringer solutions or Hartmann that has sodium chloride, potassium, calcium, and has bicarbonate. But if you say, or if you see lactated Ringer, it contains lactate. So that makes a difference. Now, why would I make this difference? Because let's assume you have a diabetic patient which arrived with ketoacidosis. It is producing a lot of ketone bodies because of the uprise in counterregulatory hormones, as you can recall. So that patient is already with acid. If you give him a solution that already has lactate in it, you're worsening his situation. Have I made myself clear? So we do not, listen to this, we do not give lactated Ringer on a patient we already suspect that it is with an ongoing metabolic acidosis, because we can worsen that scenario. Because it is lactic acid. Can you recall this? Lactate is lactic acid. Now, this is what I just told you. This is for class purposes only. You're not going to use volume expanders. Other way, they are the so-called colloids. I'm sorry, I'm back again. So Can you see the presentation? All right, so the colloids are, they were believed that they contain a large, very, very large molecules of starch. And because they have a large, is to have a very large molecule of glucose. You remember? A lot of glucoses put together, they form the starch. I'm going to write it here in your starch. So they were very, very, very big molecules that you have on the intravascular space. Therefore, they pull in a great deal of water. So they were thought, or in the intensive care units, they were very used because they put a great amount of water and they expand the intravascular space. Therefore, the idea or the hypothesis first thought was, if I have a large amount of water into the intravascular space, then I will have normal blood pressure. Therefore, I will have a normal cardiac output. But in terms of acute resuscitation, in trauma or sepsis, they made this whole study and they find out that the use of volume expanders such as colloids, they caused acute kidney failure. So now they are forbidden. They prohibited from the use in acute reactions. So we have other volume expanders such as plasma or albumin. They are used in special situations, such as loss of blood. Then you infuse volume and you infuse blood transfusion. Or if you're losing blood clotting factors, then you use fresh frozen plasma. Well, we're going to see further that ahead, not just now. So in terms of classes, volume expanders are not used, and you're not going to use them. This is just for you to know that they exist, and in some past they were used a lot. So as you see here, we have the most common solutions. There are isotonic, is Ringer lactate, is the normal saline solution. You can cause this a little bit of a vascular expansion, but not so much. You're just replacing volume, you're keeping your patient hydrated, and you're replacing electrolytes. What is a contraindication of this? That you may cause edema. If you don't calculate your volume dosages, you can cause edema because you are infusing volume into the intravascular space, and as you can recall, therefore you can increase the hydrostatic pressure, and this will cause leak to the interstitial space. Now, colloids, the only one that we use right now is the albumin. Albumin, and we use it in order to keep volume a bit longer into the intravascular space. Now, get this. Are you with me? When you infuse an IV solution, how much time do you think it will last into the intravascular space once you infuse it? It lasts very little. It lasts about 30 minutes onto circulation. So if you don't address the cause of volume losses, the infusion by itself is not going to be enough. Therefore, in patients that have severe malnutrition, in an attempt to make the intravascular volume last a bit longer than the usual, you infuse albumin. And the albumin, as you can recall, is a large protein. negatively charged, and it will pull with itself a great amount of water. What is the bad thing with this? I'm sorry, I'm gonna call my dogs. Wait a minute. Hello, sorry for. Hello, anybody hear me? Sorry for the inconvenience. It won't happen again. My dogs were playing all around. So what's the bad thing about using albumin? First, it can cause an allergic reaction. Second, not every hospital has albumin available, and I mean not every hospital. Public hospitals, it is very rare for us to find albumin. And third, it is very expensive, very expensive. So you may use it, but not so much. And the other colloids that I told you before are these: the dextran, which is look at the size of the molecule, 40 kilodaltons. This is a very, very large molecule, and it shifts immediately the changes from the fluids from the interstitial space to the intravascular space. But it causes renal failure and eventually congested heart failure. That's why colloids or starches are not used. All right, so here goes. Forget about this. Forget about parenteral nutrition. Let's take a look at this, all of this, all right? Now, how much volume are you going to infuse to a patient? Because you have to do the math, all right? And we're going to say on an average, normal, physiological human being that is young, that is not a kid, and it's not an elderly, you're going to infuse from 30 to 40 milliliters per kilogram per day. That means if we have an individual that weighs 80 kilograms, if we calculate at a rate at 40, that means in 24 hours, this individual is going to be receiving a normal amount of volume between 2,400 and 3,200, all right? Now, if you divide this, because we don't have the normal amount of the solutions, they come in bags as 250 milliliters or 500 milliliters or 1,000 milliliters. So we do not have bags of 3,000 milliliters. So what do you use to do is divide this by 3, right? So you round this at 3,000 in 24 hours. That means you're going to infuse this patient of 1,000 milliliters every 8 hours. I'm sorry, I couldn't get that. I'm sorry, say again. All right, was this clear? Okay, now in the elderly people, we have to lower the dosage because we don't know if elderly people has a cardiac function in excellent conditions. Now, if they don't, and we infuse large amounts of volume, we're going to cause pulmonary edema, and we want to avoid that. So in elderly people, my suggestion is that you be careful on the amount of volume that you infuse. Now, we calculate this between 20 to 30 milliliters per kilogram per day. Now, the same exercise. Suppose you have an old man that weighs 80 kilograms, and he has to receive in 24 hours between 1,600 and 2,400 milliliters. Now, we round this at, let's say, divided by 3, right? Either divided by 3, 24 divided by 3, you can say that he has to receive 800, right, milliliters every 8 hours, okay? Or you can round it to 1,000, 800 milliliters every 8 hours. Or you can round this up right here. Instead of 2,400, you say, okay, he's going to receive 2,000 milliliters in 24 hours. That means he's going to receive 1,000 milliliters every 12 hours. Is that correct? That's why when you write your indications, these indications are meant to be followed exactly as you write them by the nurse. So if you say the patient is going to receive 1,000 milliliters every 8 hours, you already know that the patient is going to receive 3,000 milliliters in 24 hours. Okay? All right. I'll give you an example. These amounts are only to calculate what you need of volume in a 24-hour period. But let's say that you ate Chinese food and you have been vomiting for the past 2 hours. You already had 6 vomits, and you have diarrhea, and you have been gone about 10 times to the bathroom. All right? Let's say your blood pressure is 80/40, and you have a heart rate of 110 beats per minute. All right? Are you following me? So at this point, when you have a low blood pressure, that means 80/40, and you have a heart rate of 110 beats per minute, this automatically says that you're hemodynamically unstable, right? You're hypotensive, you're tachycardic, because you have lost a lot of fluids between vomiting and diarrhea. All right? So what you do this, you accelerate the rate of infusion. All right? So instead of prescribing the normal dosage on a 24-hour period, you're going to infuse an IV bolus. Keep this in mind. We're going to see this now. All right? You're going to infuse it very fast in order to correct the hemodynamic status of a patient. So we have methods. We have intermittent infusion or continuous drip, or what I just told you, an IV push or an IV bolus. And bolus means you're going to infuse it very fast as you can. So in this case, let's go back again, that you have a normal individual that is young, that ate Chinese food and has been vomiting and has diarrhea, and you find him with these vital signs. First question, what kinds of solution would you infuse this patient? All right. All right. I see where we are failing. You're going to use only crystalloids, all right? Neither hypotonic nor hypertonic. Those are only for classes only. What you're going to use every day in your hospital stay are going to be crystalloids. And there are 3 types of crystalloids. Either normal saline solution, all right? Normal saline solution. You have Hartmann, all right? You have lactated, Ringer, and you have mixed solutions, all right? Now, you already know that he's lost a lot of volume and probably a lot of electrolytes because he has been vomiting and diarrhea. Which solution would you rule out immediately? That you don't need it right there. From these 4, which solution you're not going to give? It will be your last choice. Okay, lactated, because you don't know if your patient is starting to have an acidosis, but okay, you're not going to give him, in first hand, you're not going to give him anything that has glucose, because your first need is to keep him hydrated, not with carbohydrate infusions. So either you can give him either normal saline solution or Hartmann solution. Are we okay on this? All right. Now, once you've made a choice of what type of solution you're going to give your patient, how much are you going to infuse him in order to correct? Careful with the question. I'm not asking how much infusion are you going to give him within the next 24 hours. How much volume are you going to infuse him in order to correct his hemodynamic state? I'm going to give you a hint. Imagine for a bit that you have been walking for about 4 or 5 hours and you forgot your water, and the sunshine is upon you, like killing you, and you have been sweating all around, and suddenly you arrive to a place that they have water, all right? What kind of size would you order your water? Are you going to ask for a little bottle of 50 milliliters of water? Or are you going to ask for 2 waters of 50 milliliters? Or are you going to ask for a big liter of water to drink? That's right, you're going to ask for a lot of water, all right? For a lot of water, because you need to hydrate. You are dehydrated from all the walking and all the sweating under the sunshine. Now, this is just about the same. He has been vomiting, he has been on diarrhea, and he's very, very dehydrated at the point that he cannot keep his blood pressure up because he doesn't have any volume. Now, you choose either normal saline or Hartmann solution, which is fine. But how much are you going to infusing, and what method are you going to infuse it? All right, Danny, you say 3,000. Let's do this. Though it may seem reasonable, but what you want to do is, for now, you just want to correct his hemodynamic state. So you're going to infuse him, let's say, 1 liter of water, all right? So you infuse 1 liter in IV volumes, that means very fast, and then you're going to check his vital signs again, okay? If he improved, then you can infuse him another or the same solution, but you make your calculus within the next 24 hours. That's right. So there are no rules for this. There are no rules, no recipes. You have to make your decision based on your knowledge and based on your patient conditions. What is my suggestion regarding an IV bolus is that you go careful on this, all right? First, you may infuse even 500 if you have an elderly patient, and you see if his vital signs correct. But if not, you can infuse another IV bolus and see if it's corrected. Because every patient responds differently. So there are no rules for this, but you have to be very careful on the amount of volume that you infuse. All right? So yes, you start in this patient that you have a young patient, all right, and is dehydrated. You will assume that his cardiac function is excellent, so he can pump up volume if you infuse him 1,000 milliliters. If his hemodynamic state corrects, that means he raises his blood pressure and stop being tachycardic, that means you already correct that. Now, your second objective is to keep him hydrated, and you're going to make your calculus within the next 24 hours, right? Let's say the same example, but you have an elderly woman that it is 80 years old. 80 years old, and she tells you that she has a cardiac failure, but she ate at a Chinese restaurant and has been vomiting and it has diarrhea. Mario, that's good, 500, but remember, she has cardiac failure. Cardiac failure. She already is telling you that her cardiac pump function is not functioning. Yes, Jesus, you started with a little bit less than that, 1/4 of a liter. You start with a 250 milliliters, and an IV bolus, and you check her vital signs. You be careful on this, because what is the consequence if you infuse her a large amount of volume? Pulmonary edema. Pulmonary edema, and you have to be very careful with this. They have trouble breathing. You're filling the lungs with liquid. So you have to be very careful with this in elderly people. So you be very careful with the amounts on elderly people. So you infuse very little, and then you go from there. Okay? Questions so far? All right. And you have mixed solutions. That means an amount of glucose mixed with normal saline solution. You give this in an attempt to give the patient a little bit of a carbohydrate infusion. That means when they haven't eaten for about a day or 2 or 3, and they starting having headaches, and they have a condition that they cannot eat, so you give them a little glucose because they need it. Now, there's a special solution that is a big tiny base, that it is just glucose solution at 50%. 50%. Now, how many grams does this solution have? And it is about it is 50 milliliters. 50%. You all agree with me that it has 500 grams of glucose. Now, these little solutions are very special, because when you see a patient that has been or is beginning to be hypoglycemic, they start sweating and they're just about to faint. You give him right away, you infuse him in an IV bolus, a dextrose solution at 50%, and you correct that immediately. All right? So the general recommendations are these. You have to check out for the volume of the patient. You have to look for normal volume, hypoglycemia. This is very common among diabetics, that they infuse themselves with insulin and they didn't eat, so they fall into a hypoglycemic state. So if you're on the street, you're not going to infuse him with a dextrose solution at 50%. You give him an orange juice or a Coke. But if you're in a hospital, you're not going to infuse him a Coke or an orange juice. You're going to infuse him with a dextrose solution at 50%, and you correct the status of hypoglycemia very quickly. Now, we're just about to end. You have to check out for volume of the patient, and you have to check for his electrolytes, all right? Let's assume that you find a patient that is dehydrated, but his sodium values are 160 milliequivalents per liter. What type of solution would you recommend? Yes, the question is, you have a patient that is dehydrated, but you find his seric sodium value at 160 milliequivalents, which is very high. Isotonic, such as what solution? All right. Are you going to give him normal saline solution? No, that's correct, because it is a bit high in osmolarity. Then what type of solution would you give this patient? Because he needs volume. He doesn't need any solutes. Yes, you can give it either Ringer lactated or Hartmann. Very good, very good. Either of those two, you can give it. All right? And if you have a patient that has or is dehydrated, very dehydrated, and has his sodium values in 122, you could give Ringer lactated, but in this case he needs both. He needs volume and he needs electrolytes. Normal saline solution, because you're giving me water and salt at the same time. What do you give a patient that has been on a fasting state during the last 3 days and he's dehydrated and has low sodium? He has three conditions. Yes, you can give him Hartmann. You are addressing the volume and the electrolytes, but he's in a fasting state. Yes, not just dextrose solution, but he needs glucose, he needs volume, and he needs electrolytes, right? So what is the best solution to give to this patient? Yes, a mixed solution. So you give him glucose, you give him solutes, and you give him volume. And you address all three problems with one solution. Are there any questions? All right, well, I thank you all for being here. I'm sorry for the inconvenience of the noise. I promise it won't be like that for further sessions. Have a great night, and I'll see you next week. Thank you all. Good night.